country members of Organization of Islamic Cooperation, or OIC, and concerned stakeholders to network, communicate, share, and learn from global experts, business leaders, and professionals. And it's an honor for me to be here with distinguished speakers that I introduce shortly. First, I'd like to quickly introduce myself. My name is Rahayu Budi Handayani. People call me Ayu. I'm a lecturer of Fashion Design Department at Universitas Ciputra, Indonesia, and will guide the webinar today as a moderator. Modest fashion first began gaining momentum over social media owing to the millennial Muslim bloggers who built huge communities online through their hijab posts, tutorials, and mainly fashion posts on the art of layering clothes to create modest yet chic and trendy styles. The Muslim population is close to reaching 2 billion of the global population and is projected to become 30% of the global population by 2030, according to report by Pew Research. And more than 50% of the world's Muslim population is under 25 and has spending power. And it's a huge and potential market. But on the other hand, we all know that the fashion industry also contributes to several environmental and social problems, which lead to the emerging discourse of sustainability in fashion industry. And today, we will discuss this topic about sustainability that will drive the future of modest fashion with the best speakers in this area. I want to say hi to Miss Aisha Nancy Novakovic. Hi,
Hello,
Miss Aisha. Nice to meet you, the founder of Modest Fashion Australia. Thank you very much for your time, for being here. And also we have the second speaker, Miss Ainara Adnan, the founder of Neaware. How are you, Miss Ainara?
Hi, Rahayu. Yeah, I'm very good. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you, Miss Ainara. And the third speaker, we have Miss Rain Reed, one of the experts in the global business of fashion. We really want to hear the insight from her. And then the speaker, the last but not least, we have Miss Özlem Sahin Ertas. I hope I didn't pronounce it wrong. The CEO of Think Fashion Group Companies and Global Modest Fashion Week. Hi, Miss Özlem. How are you?
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Thank you for organizing such a great webinar.
Thank you. So each speaker will be given 15 minutes to deliver the presentation. And then after that, we will have Q&A session for about 5 minutes right after the presentation. So therefore, during all the talks, if you have any question, you can type in the chat feature below. Okay, without further delay, we will invite the first speaker, Miss Aisha Nancy Novakovic, half Indonesian, Yugoslav, born in Indonesia, and came to Australia when she was 6 weeks old. 6 weeks old. And in 2018, Aisha founded Modest Fashion Australia, a platform for creating fashion events, connecting with other founders globally, and supporting the modest fashion industry more generally. Aisha then launched her online fashion business, Secret Sky, a website that sells modest fashion products and support local and international modest fashion designers and artists. And most recently, Aisha co-founded a new platform called the Global Modest Fashion Week Association with 4 other founders from the US, Russia, France, Morocco, and Indonesia. And one of it is Her Excellency Nur Asia Uno, the wife of Mr. Sandiaga Uno, Indonesian Minister of Tourism and Creative Economy. And beside her modest fashion company, Aisha's second business is a creative and cultural consultancy, and through which she works with clients such as Perth Festival, City of Perth, ABC Perth, and many grassroots community organizations. And Aisha has won several awards for her work in community, including the Centenary Medal, finalist in the WA Youth Awards, and the Jennifer Inkster Memorial Law Award for Social Justice. Very interesting. Let's hear from Miss Aisha. The time is yours.
Thank you so much, Ayu, for that generous introduction. Okay, so let's jump straight into it. Time is of the essence. I'm going to share my screen. Can everyone see that? Okay, fabulous. Okay, so let's get this started. So As we all know, the themes, first of all, thank you to the Islamic Chamber of Commerce. Thank you, AU, for moderating tonight. And thanks to my fellow panelists. I'm looking forward to hearing from all of you. And yeah, I'm really excited because I think this is a really important platform. So sustainability drives the future of modest fashion. I find that this is a really interesting wording for this topic because we're not just talking about sustainability and modest fashion, with that connecting word drives the future of that phrase. I think is a really interesting one to contemplate. And I think that actually informed the preparation of this presentation. So let's see, let me click this. All right, so, oh, I've gone too far. How do I go back? 1 second. Let me see if I can go back again. Okay, share this. That's fine. We'll do this again. Let's get this right. And then we'll go back. Sorry, guys, bear with me. Here we go. So slideshow from the beginning. Okay. All right, so we're going to look at an introduction. I'm going to look at the Sustainability Development Goal 12, the different issues and concerns, and perhaps a few humble recommendations in my view and experience. All right, so in 2012, at the Rio de Janeiro summit, it was organised by the United Nations. We analysed the progress made since the summit held in Rio de Janeiro in 1992. And also announced that the Millennium Goals were to be replaced starting in 2015 by these new Sustainable Development Goals, also called the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development Goals. So in September 2015, the United Nations General Assembly approved the agenda, which sets up a transformational view to economic, social and environmental sustainability. So this is a bit of a background and context within which we have this conversation. The current development paradigm should be transformed into an inclusive paradigm based on sustainable development and with a long-term vision. The agenda comprises the 17 goals below, which in turn include 169 targets. And as I've mentioned, I'd like to focus on the one particular goal. So that's goal 12. These universally agreed upon aspirational goals for people, the planet, prosperity and peace will not be achieved without all global and local actors, governments, the private sector and civil society. And I suppose in this conversation, OIC, Organization for Islamic Cooperation. The SDGs offer a unique opportunity to align existing sustainability initiatives through a common framework and accelerate the industry's efforts to address important challenges in the global textile value chain. Future sourcing models would largely be redefined by how the sector addresses the underlying themes as sourcing countries prioritize the goals and integrate them into their national plans. Okay, so we've got the Sustainable Development Goal 12. It's titled Responsible Consumption and Production, and it's one of the 17 SDGs established by the UN in 2015. The official wording of SDG 12 is ensure sustainable consumption and production patterns, and is meant to ensure the good use of resources, improving energy efficiency, sustainable infrastructure, and providing access to basic services, green and decent jobs, and ensuring a better quality of life for all. It has 11 targets to be achieved by at least 2030, which I personally consider was incredibly ambitious, and progress towards the targets is measured using 13 indicators. Okay, so just briefly, what are the actual targets? Well, the first 8 are known as the outcome targets, which are basically to implement a 10-year framework of programs on sustainable consumption and production patterns, achieve the sustainable management and efficient use of natural resources, reducing by half the per capita global food waste at the retail and consumer levels, and the reduction of food losses along production and supply chains, which is a personal issue that irks me, the incredible food wastage that we see as really endemic in our societies, including post-harvest losses. achieving the environmentally sound management of chemicals and all waste throughout their life cycle, reducing waste generation through prevention, reduction, recycling and reuse, which is incredibly relevant to the production of fashion textiles, encouraging companies to adopt sustainable practices, promote public procurement practices that are sustainable, and ensure that people everywhere have the relevant information and awareness for sustainable development. So that kind of ties into my last slide on recommendations for better education. The three means of achievement targets are support developing countries to strengthen their scientific and technological capacity, develop and implement tools to monitor sustainable development impacts, and remove market distortions like fossil fuel subsidies that encourage wasteful consumption. So here we have the fashion industry is currently valued at 2.2 trillion US dollars, which is massive. And within that, we can say that the modest fashion industry will be valued at 312 billion by 2024, which is actually just around the corner. So there are obviously a number of issues and concerns that we shouldn't gloss over because we are all players in this space and we all have, I believe, a civic and political duty and a corporate social responsibility. So there's a really great book out there written by McGill, Angle, Gardetti and fellow co-authors about the UN Sustainable Development Goals for the textile and fashion industry. And in that volume, in actual fact, they link the SDGs directly to the textile and fashion industry and have identified several aspects which I think are very useful for us to consider. So looking at traceability and transparency as a way forward, this was developed by a thinker, Natalia Papu-Caron, who presents a very deep understanding of what traceability and transparency concerns are all about and how they can constitute an enabler to accelerate the industry efforts towards achieving SDG 12. Then we have Sustainable Development Goal 12 and its relationship with the textile industry, which was a framework developed by other thinkers like Gabrielle and Delgado Luke, who actually they analyze how the SDG 12 can be applied directly to the textile industry, considering the circular economy, which is something I'm really passionate about because the circular economy is often overlooked and it's something we need to speak more about in the modest fashion industry. Then we look at flax fibre extraction to fashion products, leading the cultivation and extraction of fibre and further processing into yarn and fabric up to fashion garments. It also touches on aspects such as reuse and biodisposable, which is a massive issue. And then finally, there is sustainable consumption and production patterns in fashion, which analyzes the role of sustainable design development and the awareness of slow fashion, which we've all heard of, slow fashion, eco-consciousness, that kind of thing, and the actual change in the consumer mindset in order to attain goal 12, which is responsible consumption production, if we remember. So I think this also speaks to the level of education that we have in our own grassroots communities about what slow fashion means versus fast fashion and keeping up with the trends. Okay, so let's move on. So MF, part of the solution, not the problem. Modest fashion, as it's an expanding industry, therein lies a great opportunity for all of us to encourage to not be one of the greatest contributors to global pollution. So as we probably all know in this room, after oil, fashion is actually the second largest contributor of pollution in the world. So that's a big responsibility going forward. So if we think about our own Islamic values that can underpin our discussions and our mindset in this industry. So it looks, according to the Pew Research Centre, while the world's population is projected to grow 32% in the coming decades, the number of Muslims is expected to increase by 70% from 1.8 billion in 2015 to nearly 3 billion in 2060. Okay, so in 2015, Muslims made up 24.1% of the global population, and 45 years later, they are expected to make up more than 31.1%. The fashion industry has a disastrous impact on the environment. In fact, it is the second polluter. When I say, you know, when I'm talking about the Muslim population, I'm, I guess, making an assumption that modest fashion is only for Muslims. As we know, that is not correct. But for this argument's sake, I'm just focusing on the statistics related to the global Muslim population, particularly because we are talking about OIC and the Islamic Chamber. Okay, so the consumption side of sustainable fashion supply chain is important in order to understand the fashion consumer eco-fashion consumption decision and how that is usually made. So due to the adverse environmental impacts of present clothing consumption behaviour, there is a rising concern on sustainability issues. So fashion companies, including manufacturers and retailers, are increasingly developing and marketing eco-fashion to promote sustainable consumption. This is what the research is coming out with the academics in the industry now. Although fashion consumers have a positive attitude toward environmental protection, they rarely apply such an attitude into eco-fashion consumption. Again, that's what the research is saying. So the attitude behaviour gap, as we call it, in fashion consumers' environmental protection interests in eco-fashion consumption is very disappointing to many fashion companies and motivates green marketing and eco-fashion consumption research to investigate factors that influence fashion consumers' eco-fashion consumption decision. Bit of a mouthful, I apologise. Among other factors, product-related attributes of eco-fashion, example, product design, quality and price, and store-related attributes of eco-fashion, example, store design and environment, stores' ethical practices and shop convenience, have been argued as factors that have a lot of influence. And prior studies have revealed that fashion consumers are interested in purchasing eco-fashion, but they are not willing to sacrifice personally, such as paying a high price. So a very interesting example in comparison, if we can understand this. So let's put it this way. Consumers in the food sector show more commitment to ethical consumption, since food directly affects consumers' health and their choice reflects the benefit to them. On the contrary, consumers in the fashion sector show less commitment in sustainable consumption because an unethical choice does not necessarily directly affect their health and well-being. Therefore, many studies have been dedicated to investigate the motivations of fashion consumers for eco-fashion, and the motivations of purchasing eco-fashion are mainly related to the attributes of product and retail store that are beneficial for them to express fashion trends. Okay, so with some recommendations just to finish off, I would recommend that moving forward, there needs to be further research and data collection. I mean, like deep research and investigation that is evidence-based, and that should inform future practices. And that should also inform any kind of policy development that flows into broad industry support, and should actually encourage strong collaborative and cross-sector partnerships and development. Also, eco-conscious principles must be applied at every single stage, and education from the policymakers to the business owners to the consumers and so on, because I think a lot of people maybe have heard about, look, let's put it this way, the reality in a lot of these developing economies is sometimes that it's all about survival, and being eco-conscious is more of a privilege of the more developed and advanced economies. And so it's really hard to sort of harshly judge when they're trying to churn out, you know, all these products in order to increase, you know, GDP and expand their own economies. But perhaps there are some mistakes that they don't necessarily have to imitate from other more Western advanced economies. So if I could just remind that what the Quran says, it is He who has appointed you as the vice-regent, as the Khalifa on the earth. And there's also a beautiful hadith where Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, the world is beautiful and green, and truly Allah, the Exalted, has made you His stewards in it. and we'll see how you acquit yourself. So this is speaking about duty, and I think duty is something I really value as well. So that brings us to the very end of my presentation. Thank you for your patience and thank you for the opportunity. And I will hang around for as long as I can, and just to let you and the panelists know that I will unfortunately have to exit for my next commitment in about 15 minutes. But thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Aisa, for the amazing presentation. Well, actually, we already have some question here. And also, I would like to say hi to some of our participants who already say hi to us. And there's a question from Mr. Roberto. And maybe you can answer it directly. Do you want to answer it live or just type an answer? I think, is it better to answer it in live?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay.
I can't see the question. So
okay, I will read it. I will read it for you.
Impose rules on manufacturers to make it obligatory to use sustainable materials in their manufacturing process. Thank you, Roberto, for your brilliant question. Well, I suppose it comes down to the sovereignty of each country and whether they believe it's going to be the best for their national and economic interest to impose stricter regulations. And if you think about, some of the hugely disastrous incidences that have occurred, say in factories, the pressure from other European companies that have expected, the workers, the labour conditions are absolutely disastrous, and that affects the supply chain and the ethics, and to be honest, I'll be very frank, a lot of these incidences are taking place in Islamic countries, well, Muslim majority countries, if you want to use that term. And you wonder perhaps where the thinking is. Is it all profit driven? Is it the survival of the fittest? Is there space to actually consider Islamic ethics principles? Or if you want to broaden that scope and say, well, we want to integrate the SDG goals as a common framework that member countries recognise, then you can point to that as well. So that's the rules. I'm from a legal profession, so I'm a lawyer by training, and it requires the parliament or the parliament of each of those countries to say we want to make a change. I come from Perth in WA. The state parliament phased out the use of single-use plastics as of July. Okay, so we're not allowed to use those restaurants and allowed to supply them and so on. And other countries have actually been more advanced than us, in actual fact. I believe Rwanda banned plastic in 2008 when it wasn't even a thing. Okay, I hope that answers your question, Roberto, unless you have any follow-up questions.
Okay. While we wait, thank you very much, Miss Aisha. Maybe because we need to, do we need to wait?
Absolutely.
Okay.
No, I'm happy for you to continue with the other panelists. Thank you.
Okay,
Ayu.
thank you. Thank you very much, Miss Aisha. Thank you for sharing about the position of modest fashion and SDGs, also for the recommendation you've been given to us. I hope that it can give good insight and recommendation. Also, after this, you have another meeting. If you need to leave shortly, we will meet again in the next opportunity.
I'll hang around for another 10 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Miss Aisa. Okay, for the next one, we have Miss Ainara. Before we have Miss Aisha, who already introduced us about the position of modest fashion and SDGs. And after this, maybe we can hear about how the best practice of implementing sustainability in doing the business through Neoware. Miss Ainara Adnan is a dynamic and young female entrepreneur beside her age. And she has over 10 years of experience in fashion and marketing. She is knowledgeable about the modest fashion and represent the modest wear community. She is in the quest to solve a personal problem, which is shared by millions of other young women in the community. And her mission is to make sustainable modest fashion accessible for women of all levels of society around the world. Her modest fashion brand name, Nea Wear, is based in UK. Correct me if I'm wrong. And I found that it just got most sustainable modest clothing brand in 2022 from the Southern Enterprise Awards. And let's hear her insightful session. Miss Ainara, hello.
Hello everyone. Thank you so much for such a kind introduction. First and foremost, I wanted to thank again the ICCIA for inviting me to be part of this very important conversation among such amazing women that I admire, like Mrs. Aisha, Mrs. Oslam, Mrs. Rain. And yeah, I'm very grateful to be here.
Yes, you can start it right now. The time is yours.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yes,
so yeah, that is. So it's quite a beautiful synchronicity that my first slide starts with the last verse, last hadith that Mrs. Aisha mentioned. And so yeah, again, I wanted to start this presentation and this conversation with these words from our Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, that the world is beautiful and verdant, and verily God, be He exalted, has made you His stewards in it, and He sees how you are equipped with yourself. You can go to the next slide, but I wanted to start this as an introduction for really reflecting upon the importance that we have as human beings towards the environment and towards society and the biomes, and obviously now focusing on fashion and how all of this plays around modest fashion. You can go to the next slide if you can, please, so I can continue. Thank you. So a bit of an overview on modest fashion today. And as Aisha rightly said, modest fashion is mainly dominated by the Muslim community. However, it's not the only community that adheres or that it's part of the modest fashion movement. We have a growing number of other religious people like Orthodox Jews and Orthodox Christians, but we also have secular people that want to be part of the modest fashion community because of their style preferences, because they might like clothes that have more like a comfortable feel or oversized fitting. So yeah, it's an industry that it's mainly Muslim, but it's also very diverse, and that's why I think that representation and inclusivity is important in the industry, and trying to cater to different levels of modesty. Another remark that I wanted to make, given that the theme today is that sustainability drives the future of modest fashion, is that as for today, only a very small percentage of the modest fashion industry is actually sustainable. It's mostly driven by fast fashion. And let's have an overview of, again, some data that Aisha did mention already, but it's important to know that there's going to be that increase in population, and more people in society will be driving towards modest fashion. And one clear example is there's a 90% increase in searches for modest fashion in 2019. So people are looking for modest fashion, people are searching for it. There is a hashtag on TikTok that has 1.3 billion views and growing, and it's becoming a huge part of the current trend in fashion. You can go to the next. So one of the main things to ponder upon is like, okay, we have this growth in the interest towards modest fashion, but do we have sustainability in the modest fashion industry? As I mentioned before, is a very small percentage that is really adhering towards sustainability. However, if we understand modest fashion as part of a wider ideology in terms of how we, not only how we dress, but also how we treat others and our values, I think that both should be interrelated. So I would want to give, obviously this is a lot of information, but just an overview on the current impact of fashion, and especially fast fashion, in the environment and society, and as part of their adherence to their sustainability goals set by the UN. As Aisha rightly said, the second biggest polluting industry in the world is fashion. And one of the main problems are water pollution, soil degradation, waste, greenhouse emissions, rainforest destruction, poverty, and negative environmental impact, and the creation of climate refugees. So as you might have seen recently, there's been this summer has been one of the driest in the world, and there's been several droughts, but also a lot of floods in countries like Pakistan. Over 1,000 people have recently died due to these environmental conditions. And there is a parallel to draw in terms of how we do fashion, as especially in producing the garments and the textiles. Pakistan is one of the biggest textile producing countries, like among China and Turkey and other countries. However, this industry, it's polluting 1.5 trillion liters of water per year. There's no regulation in terms of the clothing dyeing creates so much pollution into the water, and it goes straight into the rivers, and these rivers obviously go through communities, and then it creates a huge, is like a huge problem that ends up in an estimated 9 million deaths due to pollution every year, which is a lot. And there is some of the numbers I want to highlight in terms of how big this problem is, and how much we should be aware of it. Is that, for example, 1.2 billion people are likely to become refugees. So that's 1.2 billion people by 2050 in direct relation to climate change and obviously pollution. There is also, in terms of poverty, 93% of brands that were surveyed by Ethical Fashion checked that they aren't paying garment workers a living wage. And these garment workers, most of them are under the age of 18, so they're underage, and they get stuck on their poverty cycle, not having access to education and other human rights. Also, 68% of fast fashion brands don't maintain gender equality, and given that a lot of those garment workers are women like us that have to feed their families and have to work through 14, 16 hour days without any breaks, not even for water in some cases. So not to mention the problem with waste. 190,000 tons of textile microfibers are released to the ocean every year, and these end up in our food, in our water, in the air we breathe. So we are also being affected by this waste problem directly into our health. They've recently found microfibers even in our lungs. So this plastic polyester made textiles release microfibers that are getting into our system and causing lots of illnesses as a byproduct. And we also know that, for example, the certification process in certain countries like Mongolia is up to 90% due to grazing of goats for cashmere and wool. So, well, I think those are very scary numbers, but I think that's enough for us to really think deeply and understand how big the problem really is. So you can go to the next slide, please. Now I want to give a little overview on Neoware and how we can meet into in our little or small way we can impact on this industry towards a positive change, and to make sustainability drive modest fashion. I founded Neoware to empower women that wants to dress modestly and live sustainably, and at the same time live through their full potential. As for today, we saved 5,000 meters of fabric from ending in landfills by upcycling fabrics. And we've recycled 130,000 plastic bottles from the oceans that we have turned into recycled polyester, and we've made hijabs and dresses with it. Our model is simple. We design for durability. We upcycle and recycle. That's our main purpose. We don't want to make new things because we think that the main problem in the fashion industry is that there is too much already. So then we go into production, transportation, marketing, sale, and after the sale, we're thinking on ways to repurpose. How can we avoid clothing from landing into landfills? And as for today, majority of the clothing goes into landfills between 5 years of usage. So the lifespan of clothes really have decreased in the last 20 years, from 50 years to not over 5 years. So we use things and we throw them, and obviously this creates a huge problem. We base ourselves in 3 key principles, which is reuse, reduce, and recycle. And that's how we reuse fabrics from factory cut-ups, and we promote high quality to buy less but buy well. And then we recycle materials like recycled polyester or rPET from the oceans. And yeah, so that's one of our missions, and that's how we do it currently. So you can go to the next slide, please. Then I wanted to then talk about our responsibility and how I think that as a community and as a society, we can improve and even become stronger. Mainly, I was reading recently, yesterday, that investors, when they're going to invest in sustainable businesses, there is a trend towards sustainability and investing in sustainability and green ventures, but the main driving force is still profitability. And if you're not making profit, at the end of the day, you're not being sustainable because you can't sustain yourself into the future. So one of the huge challenges that we currently are facing is to first of all, the access to sustainable materials or sustainable supply chains and ethical supply chains is very difficult. It's not so regulated, and even though someone might have a certification that they are indeed sustainable and ethical, sometimes is not so clear. So there's a lack of transparency, as you mentioned, and also the way to advance as a business and really make profit is very challenging, given that the raw materials are very expensive, and even sourcing sustainable materials is much more complicated. And obviously ethical manufacturing requires fair wage, so it's not as cheap. Fast fashion, it's advancing very quickly because the people who are paying the price are not the consumers, but are the garment workers and the people who are in the supply chain process. But how can we compete as a sustainable modest fashion? How can we compete with that and still be profitable? That's been one of our main challenges, to have a competitive price range, and that obviously has decreased our profits. But at the same time, we've been able to continue working on our ways to continue being sustainable and growing at the same time. So that's one very important thing to think about. How can we be profitable and be sustainable at the same time and continue growing? So I would, from my experience, from my small experience, I would say that the most important thing, that I completely agree with Aisha, is that we need to focus on education. One of the main purpose of my brand is to educate the consumer, to educate the community, even the Muslim community, and other communities, the modest fashion community, on why is it so important, not only for others, but for ourselves too, and for our own health, to be sustainable and ethical. I would say that governments and organizations should invest more in sustainable development and supply chains, and that would help also drive profit. To end, I would say that the Islamic world can play a positive role, combining Quranic codes about waste with modern business practices to be kind to the environment. And as the sector matures, its transformative powers will continue to shape society for the better. So I think it's a joint effort, and we together with opportunities like this, in which we can raise awareness and really educate each other, and having these conversations and becoming more public in terms of modest fashion and sustainability, it's the way forward. So thank you so much for listening.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ainara. Very interesting presentation. And then regarding your concern about the supply chain, about the certification, and I also read here in the Q&A session, there's also one of the participants who introduced himself as he want to also integrate the recycling PET cluster. Maybe in the next session, the ICCIA can also answer your concern about how organized bridging the stakeholders to meet the vendors, the suppliers, the business owners, maybe to then meet to drive the sustainability in fashion industry. And can I ask one question to Ms. Ainara? Okay. I can see the circular principle you've been doing in your business, and then in that circular principle you've been doing, which one is the most challenging, and which one do you think still have many room to improve? Which part in that circular principle?
I would say personally that the most challenging part has been production. To ensure ethical and sustainable production, it's very difficult in terms of even profitability, because obviously you have to stay competitive within your price range. So you can't have a production that is too expensive, and also the MOQs and minimum quantities for sustainable production is usually more, because, well, I don't know why, but it is so. So that's been a huge challenge. Also, obviously as a small business, to be able to visit factories and like make sure that they are indeed ethical and indeed using sustainable fabrics. We've had a lot of adversities in terms of production. We've even had a very bad experience where we trusted our supplier and they gave us a different fabric than what we ordered. So it's a constant learning process, and obviously also as a Muslim woman, as a young Muslim woman, it's sometimes hard for even people to take you seriously and to respect you, especially when in the textile industry is very men dominated sometimes. So it's yeah, that's been I would say my biggest challenge in terms of design and marketing, and all of that is done in-house. So there's we have some sort of control over that, but yeah, the manufacturing process is a lot of work.
Yeah, I think it's a common problem. We all know that some of sustainability brands or products are still high, you know, like the price is still high, maybe because of the production process. So we need to take these notes maybe for the next question to be answered for the next session. Thank you very much, Ms. Ainara, for your presentation. And I hope that you are going well with the Neoware and continue your good things with your business. Thank you. And then the next one, we have Miss Rain Reed. Hello, Miss Rain.
Hello.
Thank you for waiting. And I want to introduce Miss Rain Reed here. Maybe some of you also already know her. She is a retail executive with 25 plus years in the global business of fashion. And she built her career living and working in some of the world's most exciting fashion capitals, including San Francisco, New York, London, Shanghai, Singapore, and Istanbul. And her professional portfolio illustrates a broad range of experience within the fashion industry. Highlights include designing and implementing new operating models for high-growth business in Asia, building merchandise range for fashion brands globally, developing modest wear designs and brands in Turkey, Malaysia, and Indonesia, implementing sustainable production practice in Africa, and mentoring emerging fashion designers, brands, and manufacturers globally. Examples of brands and companies included in Rain's portfolio include Gap, Banana Republic, Old Navy, Pottery Barn, Zalora, and Moderniza. Rain is the principal of her own consultancy specializing in merchandise development, digital strategies, and sustainable innovation. Maintaining a strong commitment to education, Rain is a lecturer in the College of Design, Creative, and Digital Industries at the University of Westminster in London, and serves on the board of trustees for Little Hand Designs, a sustainable education charity. Rain holds a Bachelor of Science in Finance and is currently earning a double master's degree in cultural leadership and sustainable innovation. Very amazing portfolio, Ms. Rain.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so without further delay, we can hear Ms. Rain's presentation. Please help us to share the presentation. Thank you, Ms. Rain. The time is yours.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. Thank you very much. I want to thank the Islamic Chamber of Commerce for this opportunity to spend time with you today. I'm also very grateful and humbled to be joined a panel with women of this experience and commitment to modest fashion sustainability. So thank you very much for sharing your ideas. I'm already very inspired. So thank you very much to my fellow panelists. So as I was introduced, you heard I've been in the business of fashion for a very long time, and perhaps I understand the challenges of the fashion industry in a slightly different way than some. I was one of those leaders who built the global supply chains and brands that we have now. And that's also the kind of thing we need to change. So my privilege to be with you today is to maybe offer some ideas about how the modest fashion industry can grow in a slightly different way than we did in the mainstream global fashion over the last 20 years. Let's start by saying that it is clear, thank you very much, that the future for modest fashion is bright. I've spent the last 5 years of my career with the privilege of working in the modest fashion industry with brands, designers, helping with fashion week styling. It's been such a privilege to be part of that global community of fashion commitment, and it's really an exciting time, particularly because modest fashion has become the global phenomenon. It's an important cross-cultural conversation. We need to make sure that that conversation continues. It's forward-looking, it's modern, it's inclusive, and it's sustainable. So if we looked at the, I'm just sharing a little bit of the Global Islamic Economy Report from 2022. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it, so I won't go into too much detail, but I would say that one of the most impressive ideas for me in the modest fashion industry is that the modest fashion segment is going to grow at about a 6.1% compounded annual growth rate over the next 4 years, taking modest fashion to a value of $375 billion by 2025. And that is so exciting. As someone who's had a career based on growth, what makes it even more exciting is that the underpinning of that growth is a growing population. Fashion loves youth, so there's something very positive about fashion, but also a second component, which is there's a growing need for adherence to Islamic ethical values as we think about consumption, which I think opens the door to thinking about sustainability in a different way in the Islamic economy. And then the third element that I think is really exciting about the growth is that there are national and regional strategies in place to start funding some of the development. And many economists are saying now that we've ended our globalization era and we're moving into the era of more regional and local development. And I think that's a very important part of a sustainable future. So that's modest fashion. I also love this image from Modanisa. I worked with Modanisa for many years, and I think it's a beautiful image. Good job, team, that shows the diversity of modest fashion and modest fashion looks. And modest fashion isn't one thing for every woman. And even in the course of one woman's life, she may change her modest expression, and we should value and champion that. If we move to the next slide, I'm going to shift gears away from the opportunity in modest fashion to the global fashion industry. Can you move to the next slide for me? She'll catch up. So what I would like to just shout out is if we look at the State of Fashion report, so another report, I love a report, coming from the Business of Fashion, which is produced annually, working with McKinsey, who's a key consultancy. The global fashion leaders in 2022 identified sustainability as both a challenge and an opportunity. And I think that is a perfect way of thinking about sustainability because it's a trade-off. It's both a really important thing to do, and it's really hard to do. As we've just heard, that beautiful story of Neoware, it's not easy to do, but the efforts there and the trade-offs are real. So I think we can understand that it's also a very important part of the global fashion industry, which the modest fashion industry may be able to benefit from in the long term. But what I would suggest actually is a call to action, because I think that 6% growth rate is both a blessing and a curse. It's both an incredible opportunity and a responsibility, because if we are growing in modest fashion at a rate of 6%, we need to think differently about supporting that growth. What does that growth mean? Maybe growth isn't only increased revenue. Maybe it's a different measure within our communities. Maybe it's a different measure within our environment. So I think there's a challenge I'll put on the table for all of us in the modest fashion industry to maybe think differently than we did as we were building the global fashion industry. It's not easy. But I do suggest there are two things that we really need to take in this challenge. One, I think we need to maintain the integrity of what modern modest fashion stands for. I think we need to balance both the ethics and the aesthetics of what modest fashion is. I'm hugely respectful of it, and I admire it very much because it celebrates a living religion. It celebrates a commitment every day. And I think as a modest fashion industry, we need to own that. I think we don't necessarily need the high street to do all of that for us. And in fact, they can't. So let's take that challenge and figure out how we can modernize and move forward while maintaining that living religion in our hearts. And then the second thing I would say is, again, to that challenge, let's take that strategic opportunity to look at the value chain in modest fashion. What can we do to make it more sustainable? And specifically, what can we do in our communities aligned with Islamic principles? So let's move on to the next slide, if you don't mind. What I'm going to propose is that while we're taking that challenge of continuing to hold on to the values of both modest fashion and a strategic view of sustainability, that there is a unique opportunity for the Islamic economy to align with the sustainable future of modest fashion. Because I think there's some synergy that already exists in the belief system and ideology. So I think a sustainable future for modest fashion that aligns with the principles of the Islamic economy, they're both values driven, they're both solution oriented, and they're both forward looking, or should be very forward looking. So I don't have a lot of time to go in detail on this, but I'll give you a little bit of some ideas, hopefully, that will spark some thinking around what I think are those three key advantages for the modest fashion industry as we move into a more sustainable future. Next slide, please. All right, so if we think about a values-driven opportunity within modest fashion, like my lovely panelists before, I'm going to go to the UN's SDGs. I think the Sustainable Development Goals are a very helpful start. I think it's a good framework. I think it allows us a global language. I don't think it solves all the problems. But it gives us a way to communicate and understand together and align some of those really strategic goals. I have laid out the 17, but I have handpicked 3, one of which we heard a little bit earlier with Aisha. I think the 3 sustainable value systems that could structure the modest fashion industry include 8, which is around sustainable economic growth, and really important fair working conditions. I think number 9, which is about resilient infrastructure. We're building for growth in modest fashion, and we need to take that as an opportunity to innovate. And then we move on to 12, which I think it is our responsibility as people in fashion to understand sustainable consumption, to figure out ways to grow that doesn't have to do with consuming more. And I think that's a huge challenge. So if we take that as potentially a framework, a starting point for any business, pick one of those, figure out where you can find the most value in your community. And then I think we add that in. The benefit of modest fashion is modest fashion in itself is already a values infused design. When we design for modest women, we're mindful. Modesty starts in the mind. It's a commitment in the heart. So when you know that and you're designing for modest fashion collections, maybe it's a special collection for Ramadan, maybe you're working with emerging young designers, whatever it is, it's intentional. And we do our best to put integrity into those garments. And that's what I frankly love about modest fashion that doesn't exist in other elements of the fashion industry. So my first suggestion is let's put those 2 frameworks together and see if we can find some way, a small way to become more sustainable. The next slide, I'll talk a little bit more about my idea that let's go for solutions. So the Islamic economy is based on solutions. Let's find solutions and let's figure it out. modest fashion should do the same. And sustainability, as we know, is ever evolving, growing, lots of ideas, but sometimes not enough practical. That will come. When we put principles with practical, I think we'll find those solutions. My suggestion again here is for a solution-oriented modest fashion future, we need to think about lifestyle design for our community, for a whole range of her life. What is she doing? What does she need? Maybe she's traveling, maybe she's going to work, maybe she's going to university in a different city. How can we think about supporting everyday life and those special occasions for women across the entire global Islamic community? I think we can do a good job of that if we put our minds together and really build that within the Islamic economy. And then I think we talked a lot about circular economy. We heard some great suggestions and how hard it is from Mia Ware, and how the circular economy, if we think about reducing, reusing, recycle, renting, repair, all of that, even in small ways, it's hard, but it can make a difference. A circular economy is coming. It makes us think differently about waste. It makes us think differently about growth. And it certainly makes us think differently about quality and durability. And as someone who's really interested in design, circular design is a fascinating idea that a product is designed to be used and used again 3, 4, 5 times. In fast fashion, we don't think like that. So that's a key difference. Now, my last suggestion, because I realize I'm nearly at time, I could talk about this forever. So let's just go to the next slide, where we'll talk a little bit about what modest fashion in a sustainable future should be forward-looking. And I echo the conversation about next generation education. It is so critical that we work with young hearts, young minds, old hearts, old minds, that we're thinking about what sustainable practice is in principle, what the framework is. It can't be everything to everyone, but let's educate. I work for a charity where we have developed stories and activities and crafts around the 17 SDGs, taking it into communities around London and outside of London, so that school children really can put those thoughts into action with their hands, because also a beautiful part about fashion is creation. And we want to make sure the next generation is thinking of that. And I also would suggest at the university level, a big challenge, how we think about the way the fashion industry works today, how to get those students employed in the fashion industry today, but really the future could look very different, and what that skill gap is and how we can progress forward while living in the day. And then obviously technology and innovation is a reality, social media, the digital life, all of those things. I would suggest we need to provide a map. Where is actual innovation happening? Where do we need it to happen? What can we leverage? And how can we find regional synergies? So we're not waiting for the big unveil from the global fashion industry, because modest fashion is growing too fast. And we need to take the opportunity to do what we can in the moment where we have it. I'm not saying it will be easy, but I think if we look and align together, it may be possible. So my final slide is just leaving you with a thank you, but also with a thought from Schrödinger, who's a Nobel Prize winning physicist in 1933, a long time ago. But his idea was to think about what nobody else has thought. Yes, a unique thought is important, but it's about those things that everybody sees. So take that opportunity, look around you, see the opportunity maybe that's right in front of us that we don't see, take a different perspective, and let's see what we can do. Again, aligning practicalities with practice. I think the Islamic economy has a strong start toward a sustainable, modest fashion industry. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rain. What a beautiful presentation. I really love the when you said about how the modern modest fashion is about ethics and aesthetic. I think it is not here. It's very beautiful.
Thank
and about
you.
how designing modest fashion have to be mindful, and it's aligned with actually with the principle of sustainability, which is about awareness. And yeah, maybe I can read. There's a question here from the participant. I think there's a suggestion about, is it possible like modest fashion manufacturers divert part of their profits to establish a global fund that can promote the awareness about the environmental damage created from the traditional textile manufacturer? Or maybe, what do you think about this suggestion?
I think it's a great idea. That what I like about that idea is its alignment. Like if we get together around a set of principles, not unlike the halal industry in food and beauty, we need something similar in fashion, and textile is the perfect place to start. We know sustainable textiles, recycled textiles are still less than 15% of the global fashion industry. So yes, I think we need to come together. I think we need to set standards, and let's find ways to share that message as we're learning what sustainable textiles could be. The key is in the community. I'm positive of that.
Yes, great. I hope that, yeah, we all hope that this is also the community. We can share the knowledge. We can share the like from the speakers here with their knowledge about how and what we can do to achieve the SDGs through modest fashion. Thank you very much, Miss Rain, for
Thank you
the
very
beautiful
much.
presentation.
Thank you.
And last but not least, we have Miss Oslem Sahin Ertas, the CEO of a Think Fashion Group that serve in different fields of the fashion industry. And they have Modest Fashion Week, global event series that is dedicated to fashion industry, Turkish Medco, production and sourcing solution, and also some, yeah, I think there's a lot of business here. Maybe Miss Oslem will give more better explanation about what it is and what business he's been doing. And let's hear from Miss Oslem. Miss Oslem, the time is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for, first of all, organizing such a great webinar. And it was quite exciting to listen all the panelists, and Ainara is actually, she's a great friend of mine. We were together in our very last edition, Dubai Modest Fashion Week 21, and it's great that seeing the achievement and like growing for all of our brands. If we can, start the presentation, I can, go quickly. So I'd like to give the big picture of us, what we are doing, because these two topics, like the sustainability and then the modesty, is the most beautiful topic that I would love to speak, and that's one of our vision of the companies actually. So we, as the Modest Fashion Weeks, the global event series, are our most well-known brands that's dedicated to modest fashion industry. And we will see the story in upcoming slides. But in here, as you just see, we have Turkish Medco. That's our, production and sourcing company. So basically, the Turkey, as you know, it's a very, very good country for fabric side and for manufacturing side. It's actually, the textile is a family business for us, but in upcoming like previous years, like we saw that there needs to be something different. We have to change the way of the production as well. And then in that Turkish Medco, I will maybe give a quick information how we turn to the regular standard manufacturing to the more sustainable side. And we also have some consultancy services as under Think Fashion Co. Because of such an global organizing such an global events, we have a chance to, in connection with the different groups like big retailers like Altair Group, Louis Vuitton Group, as Modernisize. I was in the very beginning of the company establishment, and we have very good relations with them. Or the Modist, one of the high-end like modest e-commerce platform, but it has to be turned to a different direction. So in that part, I'd like to also give all the stakeholders perspective, like because there is a big chain, as you said. We have to think about the designer perspective. We have to think about the manufacturer side and also the end consumer, and there is also the retailers. So how we can achieve that this sustainability and how we can make all these groups like in an happy environment, a profitable environment. That's the question. That's the challenge starts. Yeah, we can move. So as you see, these are our global Modus Fashion Week events. Hopefully, we will have Riyadh Modus Fashion Week in December. So the journey started in 2016 with Istanbul, and each edition, actually starting from 2017, we try to adaptate the sustainability for our Modus Fashion Weeks. How we adaptate the sustainability? We at least 20% of our brands, we try to allocate some sustainable brands. And now, like, I can see that it is growing. Now, maybe in Riyadh Modus Fashion Week December edition, we will see around 35% of the brands will be more in sustainable segment. So we can move. So in here, you can see the journey of the Modus Fashion Weeks. I would like to highlight an point of the authenticity of the Modus Fashion. We are all talking about the Modus Fashion market size is growing. Yes, it's exactly growing, but who is taking the advantage of this growth is the question that we have to think about it. As you know, now all the big players, starting from Zara, H&M, or Adidas, Nike, or D&G, Louis Vuitton, D&G, everyone wants to get a pie of the Modus Fashion, and they're surely getting I think one of the biggest pie of this, still the market size. Now, like, we have very talented designers and brands like Ainara, Neowear, or very talented emerging brands, or let's say well-established, real, modest designers and brands. How we can help them to really grow and help them their global expansion. That's quite a challenging part. The vision of the Global Modus Fashion Weeks is bringing all the different stakeholders, from designers to brands, from media to influencers, from retailers to the, let's say, VIP names and the government entities, and looking for some sustainable business relations, global business relations in that circulations. We have to collaborate. We have to support each other. If we don't support each other, if we don't create solutions, then we can only, say or admire the numbers. But then in the end, the results goes to the, let's say, the big players. That's what we, try to change or take responsibility on that part. We can move, and in next slides that you will see that the achievements of the Modus Fashion Weeks that we try to reach different groups from worldwide. Like the idea is not only the highlighting the designers and brands. For example, Halima Aden, as you know, she's the star of the Modus Fashion, and we were together from the beginning of her journey. Or in all of Global Modus Fashion Weeks, we also try to add some talk shows or some workshops that's dedicated to the business industry. And the journey goes well with the challenge for sure, but it's a great journey, and we believe that we are helping the global modest fashion movement worldwide, being inclusive and coming together and celebrating the diversity of the modest fashion together. We can move. And there are some cool covers that we are having from New York Times to Business of Fashion, from Vogue to other big media outlets. And as you see that these are the participants, it's maybe now more than 40 countries, and these are the participants till now we had in Global Modest Fashion Weeks. And that shows exactly how big and how beautiful and how diverse is the modest fashion. And as you see, we have participants from the 5 regions. And this is our next edition, Roots to the Future. And for each edition, we have a theme. For example, Amsterdam Modest Fashion Week 2019 edition, we directly dedicated to the all modest fashion week to the sustainability. And for sure, there was a reason that why we choose the Amsterdam, like instead of in that sustainability topic, because when it comes to the preferences of the regional sustainability is very different one to another. So it's very obvious to, I can say that from our modest fashion week brands or from our manufacturing experience in Europe, in mainstream and modest fashion, there is a very, very big demand on the sustainability side. So it is the demand is interestingly not comes from the because of the big retail chains, but it is also coming from the very young brands that who is really thinking about their future or their children's future. And the mindset of the young people are changing. They are not thinking about the I mean only paying for a brand. They're thinking about the paying for the uniqueness or the paying for the sustainability. We can move. Okay, so for us, the future of the modest fashion and the future of, let's say, the fashion is really these two elements that we really need to speak about: the modesty as an inclusive way. We have to speak about the sustainability, and also lastly we have to speak about the omni-channel approach. But maybe in another webinar discussion we can take this in consideration. But based on our experience also from the retailer perspective or the consumer perspective, we believe that the defining of the new luxury is changing. The luxury of the defining is changing. So one of the first thing that the people, consumers, they are looking for the uniqueness of the style. It's a must-have. Like if it's sustainable or fast fashion, they have to love the pieces. That's a must-have topic. But for some consumers, we can easily say in Europe, 100%. In some countries of the MENA region as well, the sustainability is growing very, very fastly, and they're demanding sustainable, unique collections who has a story, brand story, and who has an inclusive approach for, as my panelist friends says, from day to occasional wear or again like different socioeconomic, cultural or religious background. So we can talk about the inclusivity different topics, but it is also a must-have for all of the brands, like speaking about the inclusivity. So for when we checked for the big retailer groups, that what they are demanding right now, beside these the top let's say well-known luxury brands, these are the elements that they are looking: the uniqueness, the inclusivity, having a good storytelling, and telling the brand story in a nice way, in a right visual communication way, and for sure being sustainable. And so I think like in we are talking about the sustainability, and then we're talking about modesty as well. But this, I mean, each of the modest fashion weeks, like the first questions like we are getting, like, what is modesty and what is modest fashion? And I think like we will have the same issue on the sustainability. So then there is like very different frame of the sustainability. And when a brand speak about, and I'm a sustainable brand, it's very important to understand, are they really sustainable, or it's just then a marketing tool that we are saying, or they are saying to affect to consumers. So for example, there is eco-friendly wording, renewable, sustainable, organic, recycled. So these are very, very so many wording that we have to know and understand. And we need more transparency of the sustainability. It's okay to have, in the beginning of your sustainable journey, because the sustainability, and it is a long way. As now I will later stage, we will talk about the certifications, some of the certifications, and it's a long way. And it's okay to have 10% of 20% of sustainable, instead of like having maybe like 100% of sustainable, but being transparency and highlighting that you are on the way of sustainable and ethical brand. It's important to highlight. And we also need to understand who is our clients. Actually, now, like, I'm assuming we are here as a brand. Well, we have manufacturer, we have fabric houses as the manufacturer. It's a big supply chain, and manufacturer needs to buy the fabric. If we are talking about the sustainability and certificated fabrics, and for that certification, as you know, it really starts from farming, from the beginning of the journey. But then we have to understand like who is demanding the sustainability from our side. Are we set the vision being a sustainable brand in the beginning, or our retailer, the mid sellers, are they want from us to be a sustainable brand, and what's their certification and what is their need from our side? Or are we skipping the buyer part, or are we selling directly to our consumers? So these are different approach, and these are different, they can be a different way of defining our own sustainable way. So as we talk, like, there is a United Nations, the must-haves and the announcements, and all of our panelists explained, but I'd like to skip that part so we can continue. Yeah, I think as we know that one of the issues that I can say that on the manufacturing side under Turkish Made Co, sometimes the brands also they're not really aware why they are demanding and sustainable fabrics or sustainable production. And for example, when we are talking about ecotech standards, and these ecotech standards is a chain, and it really needs to start from farming to the fabric house, from production to the supply chain. And especially the fabric is the most challenging part. And when we are demanding and some certificated fabric, and generally these certificated fabrics are producing from the zero. Basically, the fabric houses, they don't produce the fabric, keep the stock directly. They produce from the zero. So that means like when you're producing an fabric, and you have to have give that order in big quantities. And I think that's one of the main challenge for the emerging brands or small scale brands, trying to going certificated fabric. But when you want to have certificated fabrics, there is an MOQ issue on the fabric side. So that's why we have to understand, we have to know our sustainability level and what kind of certification we are looking for, and why we are, needing, what is the need for that certification. And there are some challenges that I would like to highlight. So I think the first challenge is generally in modest fashion industry, and then also the sustainable production. So when you check the modest styles from Middle East to the Europe, or Asia to the United States, you will see totally different styles and totally different sizing and very different style preferences. Now, like if a brand would like to, when they would like to expand worldwide globally, how they can come expand it needs a big investment, what I mean. So to be able to a global brand in and targeting all that region, it needs a big investment. But there is a small trick that we have to think and check. So basically, if we check our styles and do some style differentiation, small adjustment for each region, for example, keeping the same pattern but maybe changing the color, or maybe changing the fabric, or adding some colors, for example, for Asia, or adding some stones for Middle East, so that can be a solution for that challenge. And one of the most important challenge, I believe, the lack of established modest buyers in the industry. So that's something that we really need to think and try to find a solution for that. For example, in modest fashion weeks, we are trying to invite the big players, like from Harvey Nichols to the also small boutiques, from distributors to the other groups. But then there is that's for multi-brand stores, and that's only focusing on the modesty. And there is still a big gap for that part. I think we really have to focus on that part. And as all the panelists talk about, the awareness is a key. And in modest consumer awareness about the sustainability, we have to work on it all together. And as Ainara said, the mass production and emerging designers challenge is still there. And lastly, we have to share and collaborate more. For example, for sustainability part in Turkey, we started an online seminar. Like it was a free seminar for that's covered by the N1 Turkish Textile Association. And it was like 10 weeks seminars, and it was directly focusing on the sustainability And then there was a very, very useful information from A to Z. I think we have to share all of our know-how and as much as we can. So as last slide, we can talk about the opportunities. We are now in the modest fashion movement. So modest fashion was already there for a long time, actually. It is not a trend, it was there. But now, because of the like platforms, maybe the modest fashion weeks, or as for influencers, for modest media, we started to here, and for sure one of the main reason, the big players now showing an interest to the modest fashion. There is a movement, but we have to use that movement in the right direction. So if we have a limited investment, if we are still a small scale brand, we have to define our consumers very well. And if we would like to expand from other regions, other countries, finding the right potential business partners is very key. And also using the other stakeholders like influencers, I think it's a very, very important opportunity for all of the brands. And the market size of the modest fashion and sustainable fashion, that's the main opportunities for sure. And I think as I highlighted previously, there is a big potential for modest brands to positioning them like high-end sustainable brands, and targeting the different regions within like inclusive brand tone. So instead of like focusing on the fast fashion modesty, focusing on the high-end branding is, I believe, will be the right direction for the modest brands. And these are our information. We will be happy to help for any kind of communication about the modest fashion, and also the production on the sustainability.
Thank you very much, Ms. Oslim, for the presentation. And maybe I want to ask just one question for you. What do you think about the role of Fashion Week to promote the sustainability in modest fashion industry?
So basically, I mean, I will speak first of all our own, Fashion Week. So we have a very niche and specific Fashion Week. We call it like Modest Fashion Week. And now inside of that, the Modest Fashion Week, we have to speak about the sustainability in each edition. It's a must-have. So as we speaking, it is the future of the fashion, and also the importance of the why we have to speak about it, because now a big part of the modest brands, they are in the segment of the still small scale brands. There are very well established brands like like Modernisa or other brands, but for these small scale brands, it's still very easy to turn their direction to the sustainability. So that's what we try to achieve. So if we turn their direction from fast fashion to the sustainable, at least in their direction, so we believe that they will have a chance to get more market size on this modest fashion movement. And that's the reason it's very important to speak about modesty and sustainability together in Modest Fashion Weeks. And in global collections, the luxury brands or global fashion weeks, we see that there is always a specific sustainability topic or very crazy cool fashion shows that's dedicated to sustainability, and it's a must-have.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Oslam, for your answer. And it seems like our time we are in the end of the session, but before I close this beautiful webinar, can I get the closing statement from each the speakers? Maybe start from Ms. Ainara. Do you want to have a closing statement?
Yeah, thank you so much, Ayu. I've got to say that thank you so much to everyone that was part of this webinar and for the Islamic Chamber of Commerce for making it happen. I've learned a lot from all these wonderful panelists alongside myself, and it's just ignited that passion of mine towards disrupting the industry into a positive and bright future. And yeah, so let's keep this conversation, let's keep this excitement, and thank you again for having me.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ainara, and I hope that you're going well with NeoWare. And the next one, maybe Ms. Rain, do you want to have the closing statement?
Sure. So I will make it very quick, but I would say we have to take this growth opportunity as a call to think differently. Let's identify those sustainable principles that make a difference in our community, for our community, and let's put them into practice, even in small ways, really making sure that we're being future oriented. We understand the trade-offs, but we're making that long-term possibility happen for modest fashion. I believe modest fashion is the future, and we must create a sustainable way of that path.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rain. And then last but not least, Ms. Oslam.
I just wanted to say that we are better together, and maybe specifically for the sustainability, let's be the pioneer for the future of the fashion instead of like accepting what they are putting for us. Let's write the future all together. We can do that.
Awesome. Okay, it's the end of this webinar for today. It's really fruitful discussion we have. I'm really happy to be here to moderate 4 amazing women, all women here in this field. I really hope that what we discuss in this opportunity able to contribute to achieving the target of sustainable development goals and to the circular economy through modest fashion industry. And thank you very much for all who joining us today. Thank you ICCIA for giving us the opportunity to be here. Please stay healthy and hope to meet you again in another opportunity. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much.